Okay, welcome back everybody. Mr. Dingle here again for the third part of the side scroller tutorial. In this particular one, we're going to finish off the PlayerController script and we're going to move on to the other three scripts because they're not that complex. Okay, so far you should have your horizontal movement working, you should have your jumping working, just like you see in the script. Okay, but there is a problem with what's going on here. Now, and the problem is, and it took me a friggin' ages to get this working, is that if we hit the side of an object, we get stuck. We don't fall until we let go and move the other way. I'm pressing space, nothing's happening. Okay, that would even happen if I fell off the side of the world. Okay, I can't cheat, but I still get stuck on the side of objects. So what we need to do is we need to add in a quick check to see if we're hitting anything on the sides of the object. If we are, then we stop moving and we just let the character fall straight down and not get stuck inside this object. Okay, and we're going to be using what you call a sweep test. It's very similar to a raycast. In fact, it is a raycast in its own right. Okay, and we're going to add it just underneath here. Okay, as a check. So we're going to check if we are hitting the sides of an object. Now this is going to be a lot more code than we've done in the previous video for just one problem. So remember when I said about problem solving? Okay, we just do one thing at a time, and this is another one thing that I had to do, and we're going to add into our script. The first thing we need to do is figure out how far we've traveled in the script. Okay, we then need to figure out if we're hitting anything, and if we are, we then need to stop moving left and right. Okay, that's a fair bit. So the first thing we should do is calculate how far we've moved. So we're going to make a variable just here called distance as a float, like always, because it's a number. And then we're going to calculate the distance we traveled. And we can do this by rigid body .velocity .magnitude times time dot fixed delta time. Okay. You don't have to remember that, okay? I even had to scour the internet for this answer. Don't stress. We're then going to create a second variable called hit, which I don't need to use, but Unity wants me to, so I'm going to anyway. So, and then we're going to have an if statement to see if we hit anything on the left and the right-hand side of the object. So as I said before, we're going to use a sweep test. So rigid body dot sweep test. Okay, just a basic sweep test. Okay, the three things we need to give it is our velocity, all right, the hit variable that I said that I don't want to use, and the distance that we traveled. All right, so you go, the velocity is a rigid body dot velocity. It's as simple as that. The hit variable that I don't want to use, and the distance one we made up, just as above. Okay, close two brackets because we have two open. Open a squiggly, close a squiggly. Okay, and I'm going to put another comment right here. Stop moving. Okay, and that's as easy. What we're going to do is we're going to go rigid body dot velocity dot x equals 0. And hopefully that will ensure that we can't move left and right while we're hitting the side of an object. So remember, this checks if we're hitting the side of an object. So let's have a look at it and see if it works. So, whoop, missed. Look at that. I'm pressing left and right, and I'm just falling. And I can still move left and right. Now, if there's any bugs with this, please tell me, because I'm not too sure. I've only been testing it a bit. So if there's any issues with this bit of code that we've just added, all right, make sure you email me and tell me straight away. So that's that problem solved. The next two things that I want to add is we want to be able to hurt the player with our hurt tag, and we want to be able to enable the super speed, okay, when the player hits that yellow cube. So the first thing that we're going to add in here is the health. So if we go up to the top here, okay, so we're going to add in the ability to die. So let's go var health as an integer this time because we don't want fractional parts, we only want whole numbers. Okay, equals, let's say, 5. That means we can get hit 5 times before we die. Simple as that. All right. We're then going to make another function of our own down the bottom here. So there's our line 6 variable. We're going to come down here and we're going to make a function called hit. So in this function, remove 1 hit point and check if we are dead. And this is going to be really straightforward, okay? What we do, we need to take 1 off of health. So you go health minus equals 1. So that means that we just take 1 off the value of health. And then we're going to check if we've got no health left. So if health equals 0, what are we going to do? Okay, first of all, we're going to print a message on the console. Later on, we can do something more pretty. But that's up to you guys, not me. And then we're going to destroy the player. So they can't move. So notice how I've got a little g on the front of that. If it was a big G, it wouldn't work. So the hit function takes away 1 hit point. If they are 0, we tell them they died, and then we kill them. That's it. That's the hit function done. The last thing we need to do is, in the first video, we set up a tag called hurt. And the idea is, when the player hits anything that has this tag hurt, it could be a cube, it could be an enemy, it could be a flying object, it could be anything. Alright? We want to be able to check if the player has hit them using that tag and take off and call this hit function. So what we're going to do, we're going to add in the function on collision enter. Okay? Curly. Oop, closing curly. And in this, when we hit something, we're going to check if it has the tag of hurt. If something has been tagged hurt, then we simply call this function hit up here. Alright, which will handle taking off a hit point, checking if they're dead, things like that. Alright, and the benefit of this on collision enter is it only happens once when we hit them. So, comment again, check if we hit an object that can hurt us. Alright, and then we go, okay, so how do we check the object that we hit to see if it's tagged as hurt? Okay, so before I write the code, let's have a quick look in the game. Let's imagine that if I touch this cube, I get hurt for some reason. It could be spikes. Alright, if I go up here and set the tag to hurt, it should automatically hurt me when I touch that now, as soon as I touch it. So, as an example, to check if the tag is hurt, we go if, we've got this collision thing here with a little c, collision dot game object dot tag. So that's how we check what tag we've set. I'll leave the code up there, sorry. If tag equals hurt, then we are hit. Just like that. So if the game object has the tag hurt, then hit us. Which will automatically, as I said, handle taking off a hit point and checking if we're dead. That's pretty much it. Okay? We're now going to add in a fair bit of code. That's the hit done, the health and all that kind of stuff in my consideration. You might want to change it a little bit later on, but just as a simple introduction, that's done. So before we move on to the next bit, I just wanted to explain that. This next bit is going to be huge. Okay? We want super speed now. Super speed, when we grab a yellow object, the yellow object disappears, but we've all of a sudden got this ability to move twice as fast. So there's 2 things that we need to do up the top. We need to add in 2 parameters here. Okay. First parameter is super speed. Just like normal, just like speed, but super. Yeah. We're going to make it a float, and it's going to be 10, so it's more than double. We're then going to add in the next one, which is super speed time as a float. And I'm going to set that to 5 by default. What this is going to tell the game is how long they've got this super speed for. Okay, how quickly are we going to move for? Now, the first problem is we need to know whether or not we're going to use the normal speed or the super speed. So I'm going to introduce this concept of a private parameter, a private variable. Alright, let me just quickly let me delete this for a second and save. If I jump back to Unity, click on the player like I always do, you'll now notice he's got speed, jump height, super speed, super speed time, and health. Alright, all of them are changeable. But what we need to do, we need to have another variable which keeps track of, is super speed turned on or is it not? And we don't want to have the ability to modify that here in the game. The only thing that's going to change that is if we hit the yellow block. So, let's go into here. We're going to get private var super speed on. And this time it's going to be what you call a boolean. Okay, notice the little b. And by default, it's going to be false. So a boolean, again, like with the raycast, it's true or false. So super speed can either be on or it's off. So in this case, it's starting off. Okay. And so what we're going to do, we're going to come down. Again, we're going to write our own little function. I'm going to put it above on collision enter. I don't know why, because I feel like it. Function super speed. Now notice how I've got a capital S on the front of this and a little s on the front of the top one. That's going to make a big difference. Okay, they're completely different things. Let's just put it in our brackets and let's put a comment. Turn on super speed. And this is really, really simple. We just simply, using our private parameter, we're going to go super speed on equals true. That's it. Okay, that's going to tell us that super speed needs to be on, and instead of using the regular speed, we're going to use the super speed instead. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at the gain. Now, remember I said this is a private variable. We don't want to be able to change it in the editor. So let me deselect the character, reconnect. See that? Nothing. The super speed on hasn't appeared in here because it's private. Okay, and that's what we want. So what we're going to do, we're going to use super speed on right here in fixed update. So if you go if super speed on equals true, okay, we want to set the velocity at super speed. So I'm going to copy this line. Bam, bam. And instead of using speed, super speed. Alright. Now, if super speed isn't true, we want to use the regular speed. So basically, you go, if super speed equals true, use the super speed. Else, notice how I'm putting the curly braces in there? Else, we use the regular speed. And that's pretty much all you have to do to control the speed of it. Alright. If super speed is turned on, we use the super speed. If it's not turned on, then we use the regular speed. Okay? Now, before we go too far, let's set up the next script so we can actually test that this works. Okay? We have to set up the SpeedUp script, okay, and get that one working. Okay? Sorry. I made a big boo-boo at the very first video. We should have made 4 scripts. I did jumble over my words and say 3, but we're actually going to make another one. Let's create super speed. Okay, and you know what? It's probably a good idea if we call this something different. Speed up was my original name for it, so I'm going to keep speed up as the name, sorry. I can't use super speed because I'm using that here. All right, I need to call it something different, so that's just to be careful. Okay, it may not cause a problem, but it may cause a problem later down the road. All right, let's open this script up. What this script is going to do, it's going to check if the player touches the yellow block. If the player has touched the yellow block, it's going to turn super speed on and destroy itself. So the yellow block disappears. It's like the user collected it or something like that. All right. And for this particular script, I'm going to scrap all the built-in functions, and we're going to use one called function on trigger enter. And just like on collision enter, we've got this thing in the brackets, but this time it's collider. Collider. Curly brace. Curly brace. Okay. So what are we going to do? We're going to check if the player has hit. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do. And it's very similar to the on collision enter that we used on PlayerController. So if, but it's not collision this time, it's collider. Game object dot tag equals player. Okay, so I said that we're going to do 2 things. We're going to turn on super speed and destroy the object. So this is probably the hardest part that you'll ever have to do. Okay, capital G for game object. We need to talk to this player controller script. Okay, so on this player, we need to call this function here, and you can't just type in super speed. You need to specify the player controller. So this is the hard part, okay, and you probably have to do this a couple of times before you get used to it. So in the game object, we want to find the player. We want to send it a message, okay? Okay, what message do we want to send it? We want to send it super speed. So notice how this is the exact same way we typed in the function. So this is actually going to call that function from another script. It's a little bit fiddly, but it's the cheapest and the easiest way for us to do that. Okay, and then we need to destroy our object, which is just destroy game object. Notice we've got a little g this time. Okay, probably one of the most complex things you'll do right there, but it's really, really good. Okay, so there's one thing we need to set up right now is we did not tag the player, so let's quickly do that. Let's tag their player as player. So notice the name and the tag are both player with capital P's. And I'm going to make this a super speed object. So that means a yellow material, and it needs the SpeedUp script. Okay, before you hit play and before you try and test this out, we use the function onTriggerEnter. By default, doesn't work on normal objects. What you have to do is tick this box, is trigger. Now it will work. So let's try it out. Make sure it works. Seems to be working to me. Characters are moving pretty darn quick. However, there's a problem. They're moving fast for as long as they want. Okay, and what I actually want is I want this to be in seconds how long that lasts for. So 5 seconds should be all they're allowed to have. Alright, so that's pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is jump back to the player controller script and handle it just in here. Okay, in the top of the script we had this variable super speed time. That's never going to change. That's always going to be 5. That's always going to be the value we picked, which at default is 5. We're going to add another private variable in here to keep track of how much time has passed. So super speed elapsed. As a float, by default it's 0. So when we turn super speed on, this is going to start counting up. When it reaches or grows bigger than super speed time, we're going to turn it back off. Alright, so all this code is going to go right in here. Okay? So we've checked if super speed is on. If it's on, we need to check how much time has passed. So check or add to elapsed time, and that's what we're going to do here. So super speed elapsed plus equals, and because we're in a fixed update, we're going to use time dot fixed delta time, and that'll tell you how much time has actually passed. Okay, since the last time we've used this function. And basically what that does is it just creates a little stopwatch, adds up, and we're now going to check if enough time has passed. So if super speed elapsed is greater than or equal to our super speed time, there's two things we want to do. First of all, we want to turn super speed on to off. Okay. Well, actually, no, sorry. That's the only thing we want to do there. But what we need to make sure is if we ever pick up a second one, we need to reset elapsed back to 0. And we simply do that in super speed. Super speed elapsed equals 0. So that's going to handle turning on the super speed, lasting for 5 seconds, and that should be it. So let's have a look. Stupid Dropbox. Let's have a look. Super speed, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm back to normal speed. And there it is. That's all we have to do for the super speed script. Okay, because I've been jabbering on for a long time, let's stop the video. I'll see you back in the next video, and we're going to be finishing up with the last two scripts, which is our moving object and chasing enemy. Okay, see you then.